All right, I'm going to show you a couple things you want to check on your Serpent buggies and truggies. A lot of the stuff will be applicable to every 8 scale nitro car, but I'm covering specifically the Serpent Srx8 truggy and buggy. So after you've got your engine installed and figured out and your gear mesh set, you're going to want to check things. Make sure everything is going to work proper, set your throttle, EPA adjustments and such. One of the first things you want to do before you put on your air filter, you want to make sure that you set your carburetor wide open throttle. So you don't want to do this with an air filter on because you don't actually know, and you don't need to be pulling your carburetor open more than it actually needs to. So hopefully you can get in there and kind of see. So you want to make sure that your carburetor opens up all the way. Another issue, especially with OS engines and OS type engines with the Serpent products, is the carburetor setup. So you might need to loosen the carburetor mounting screw right here to properly orientate the carburetor. If this carburetor is lined up flat, what will happen is that the boot and the carburetor, the linkage, will hit the brake lever. So you have to orientate it just a little bit clockwise so that you can have proper movement. So even right here I have it, the boot rubs up on the brake linkage. So that's one thing you want to check. It rubs right now, but it's nothing. Also, you're gonna have to trim out some of this. It shows it in the manual, but you're gonna need to cut off part of the differential, the rear cover where the brake discs are at, because the carburetor won't go on. The engine won't install because of that. That piece is in the way. Like the engine won't sit down onto the chassis. So that's two things you need to check when you're putting an OS engine in a Serpent product. Some of the basics that you want to cover is that the servo horn for the throttle and brake is installed in line with the vehicle, and in line, the brake half of the horn is in line with the servo so that it's pulling perpendicular, and the throttle part, it's going to follow whatever the brakes are. So ideally you'd want everything to be like nice parallel lines. As you can see, the throttle linkage is kind of coming down at an angle, but that's as good as you can get it. You also want to leave this little gap here between the throttle and the throttle stop, or what actually actuates the lever. So you want to have a little bit of gap so there's a little bit of take up before it gets to it. As well as you want this to actually have tension on it, because this is part of your throttle return. So to make sure that when it's closing, if there's play right here, this can move independently. So you want this to have tension on it. It doesn't need to be loaded all the way up, but you want to have tension on it so as you're getting on the brakes, it's forcing the throttle closed. So if I'm all the way off, as soon as I let go, I want it to be pushing it closed. And if there's if this spring is free to move, what will happen is that you could actually be closing the throttle, and then the throttle isn't closed until your return springs or return rubber bands close it. So you want to make sure there's tension on that. If you don't, you could have tuning problems like, hey, it sticks at idle. Why is it sticking at idle? Well, or sticks going to idle. Well, that could be because the linkage is not tight in the closed direction. So those are two big things you want to check before you fire up your engine and while you're building your kit and getting them dialed in. So thanks for watching.